All right, and we're live. So let me know if there's any video or sound problems in the chat. Hey, Joe. Hey, Crispin. Yeah, this isn't the weekly. This is just a live stream for something I wanted to do before the bundle of holding ran out, so I'll explain that later. Just going to flip through a couple of books, one physical book and then some PDFs. So, and yeah, the song is going to be different for a little while because there's a copyright issue with the song we were using. Jackson, the friend of the podcast and channel that we play with in the group, that's his band. And they recently have a company managing it, and they're submitting copyright claims everywhere. So we got to get that cleared up before we use it again. So hope everyone is doing good. And yeah, I'll just take a look at a book, and then also talk about the bundle of holding that's still going on. There's a couple more days. Cool. Thanks, Joe. So nice to see you guys. Thanks for stopping by. And yeah, in just a little less than 12 hours, we'll be doing this again as the weekly live. And the weekly live, it's the 100th episode. So we'll do something a little stupid, hopefully, for the 100th episode. It's been 2 years of that then. Wow. But let's get this started, and I'll show you Warlock. So welcome to Upturned Table, and today we're taking a look at Warlock. This is currently a bundle of holding. We're kind of in the last few days, so you want to check that out as soon as possible. But Warlock is a kind of OSR retro RPG, and it's designed, I'll take a look inside here quickly. It's written by Greg Saunders and designed by Fire Ruby Designs. So as you can see from the title page here, it's inspired by the early days of British tabletop gaming. So what that means is basically Warhammer Fantasy RPG and Fighting Fantasy. Those were kind of the two systems that probably were the most prevalent besides D&D. So D&D was imported, and Games Workshop supported that in White Dwarf. And then they came up with their own. And this is more reflective of that. So the early days of British RPG gaming. So what I want to do first is, this is a print-on-demand copy of the core book for Warlock. And this, currently, the price has jumped up a little bit because of what Drive-Thru RPG is doing. This is through Drive-Thru RPG, and what they've had to do with their print-on-demand. Prices went up a little bit. Originally, this was about $21. I think it's closer to, it's maybe $27 now. But it is currently on sale because of the bundle of holding. So there's a great old school illustration on the front, and all of their books have the same cover artist who was credited inside here. So the cover art is Mustafa Becker, and his stuff is great. It's got a real nice old school charm, and then there's a lot of good old school art inside. So by Dennis McCarthy, J.M. Woak, and Heather Shin. So I'll take we'll go a couple of pages into this so you can kind of see the quality and the layout, and then we'll switch over to the PDF because I think it's going to be easier to point out things and easier for you guys to read, because I might tilt this at an odd angle. But the print on demand is good quality. It's a glossy, as you can see, a glossy cover and about a B5 size, so a smaller B5 size, and there's the spine. But it's endured well, and several read-throughs, and everything is in really good shape. So the back says, "Welcome to Warlock, the rules-light role-playing game that aims to emulate the feeling of old-school British tabletop games of wondrous and fantastical adventures." And I like that Warlock has an exclamation point. That's very of the time. Dungeon and Warlock, everything is very important and very emphasized. So Warlock looks to reproduce the play style of its illustrious predecessors, but in a light, quick, and simple manner, with a consistent rule set that is easily hackable and adaptable as desired. So you literally could play old adventures of Warhammer Fantasy with this system, and that would actually be fun. And then also, as well as a lot of the settings and things that they came up with for Fighting Fantasy. So that would work very well with this. And as they said, also it's very hackable. And in fact, they have hacked it themselves because there is also a sci-fi version using this same system. So this is the physical book, and this is the premium color. So as you can see, there's some spot color here. So there's like a gold for the page numbers, and of course the fire ruby design. You can also get a cheaper black and white only version of it, and yeah, very kind of retro layout. This something that like occurred to me when I first opened the book is that, you know, they're using a nice kind of fantasy font for a lot of their headings, but the font choice itself is a little early PC gaming. It really reminded me of playing like, you know, fantasy, you know, RPG for the early PCs. So that has that, it's even an odder like retro feel to it because it doesn't have, because a lot of the early RPGs were actually just typeset on a typewriter. Like they literally were just typing these sheets out on typewriters and having them typeset that way. So you see, it's a, you know, very simple design because they're basically pamphlets at the beginning. And so using this kind of simplified font evokes both a typewriter and also kind of early computer, you know, text only kind of computer RPGs. So they've got, as you can see, great spot illustrations. So we'll go through the whole book, and I'll show you the system and everything to see if it seems like something you would be interested in, and then you can grab most of everything that they've published so far in the bundle of holding. So let's switch over to the PDF and have a look. So this will be Warlock by Fire Ruby. Okay, let's see if I can navigate this. So give me a second. All right, so there we are. So this is the PDF for the core book itself. I will maximize that so you can see. So the nice thing that they do with the PDFs that they offer is they separate the cover files from the actual book themselves, from the, you know, internal pages, because the cover would be, you know, is full color and would, even though it's an illustration, be very costly to print that. So they start with the just the title page for the PDFs. So it's very easy to print these off yourself, and because if you did it all black and white, it would not be it wouldn't be taxing on your printer at all. So I think that's a good practice. I wish there was a little bit more of that kind of thoughtfulness, and we'll see that kind of throughout the book and their thinking. All right, so Warlock. So we're going to take a step back into the mind of the early British RPG player. So just a quick look at the table of contents. So they do the obligatory kind of, you know, what is a role-playing game? What is this game? How do you play it? And I thought that was funny because this is such a, you know, kind of a love letter or a tribute to the older gaming. So I don't think it's possible, but I don't think people will be coming to this game as their very first tabletop RPG. That would be a little odd. It'd be surprising. But maybe, I mean, you know, gaming groups are looking for things, and they do have new members, and they do have people trying things out for the first time. And this actually would not be a bad introduction because it's very simplified. It'd be a good introduction to fantasy roleplay, just the same way that the fighting fantasy game books were. Because you were keeping track of stats and things and rolling dice, but you were basically reading a choose-your-own-adventure book, that style of book. So this is everything. And this is everything you'll need to play, but it's very setting light. Basically, there isn't a setting. There is a titular warlock, and there is a kingdom. And basically, things, you know, revolve in that very kind of the classic fantasy tropes around that. And so it leaves it very much up to you. In later supplemental material, they do flesh out what the kingdom is and give you some cities and some hooks for adventures. And there are some of the beginning of that in here. And as you'll see, similar to what they do with Powered by the Apocalypse, when you're creating a character that you can roll on a table and gives you some details and will put some names and places there to kind of give you, who you're looking for, who's seeking revenge against you, what kingdom you're from, or what city you're from. They'll have some of those details during character generation, but for the most part, it's a very blank slate as far as the setting, and it's kind of meant for you to create that yourself, or use adapt published previous works from this like earlier time, the earlier time of British tabletop. So let's say, again, it's a rules light role-playing game aiming to emulate that feel of old school British tabletop. And that was everything that was on the back. So they go through this, the very standard, what's this game? What do you need? So you need dice, paper, and pencils, basically, and a group of people, and you'll need, of course, this. So they're very standard, like players and DM or GM. And there are a few things you'll need before. So a few friends. So they're talking about, typically it's a 3 to 6 is ideal. But you can play with as few as 2, meaning I guess a game master and a single player, which does make sense because it is simple enough that it would adapt to just about anything, and you can roll characters relatively quickly, and even play multiple characters as a single player. So they say that it has a narrative emphasis. So you don't need miniatures or strategic maps, but they do say you can use those as well, because they do abstract distances and things. You're not counting squares. You're not counting 5-foot squares. Inches as 5 feet to move around. There's not going to be strategy and positioning and backstabbing and things. Yeah, no, the bundle of holding is all PDFs. So bundle of holding is digital only. So only through Drive-Thru RPG currently, and possibly some other places you could get the physical book itself. But yet the bundle of holding is kind of bringing back and reprinting a lot of older RPGs that come up with that they give you for it's a really good price. Like if you would buy everything digitally separately, it would be much more expensive. So it's a really big discount, and part of it goes to charity. So it's a charitable, similar to Humble Bundle and some of the other organizations that are out there. They donate a portion to charity. All right. So yeah, basically explaining, sitting around a table, there's a game master, and then who controls non-player characters and player characters. So, all the stuff we kind of know, and maybe wouldn't have picked up this book if we didn't know it or tried out. But it's actually, I like that they do this, and I guess you have to do that because you don't know. This literally could be the first game book anybody has read. And if you just yada, 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 oh, you all know this at the beginning of the game, people will be very lost, and this won't be a very useful book in itself. I mean, players that have played tabletop role-playing games before will kind of just skip through this. But it's important for it to be there just in case, because the first-time player does need this kind of, setting the scene, And that was one thing that maybe early Dungeons & Dragons and a lot of early tabletop did not do well. When people, asked, well, what is this like? What are you doing? Are there pieces on a board, or what are you doing? People never explained, players that actually played the game never explained it very well so that new people would be interested in it. It just sounded strange and difficult. So I think that's why this practice has started of kind of getting people into the headspace of what you're doing. You're telling a collaborative story. One person's kind of adjudicating rules that control when there's conflict in the story or when there's decision making. And I think that's it's good, but it feels a little a little bit like, let's go back to the beginning, the beginning of everything. So Warlock uses 20-sided dice to make its tests, and it also uses a 6-sided die. So there are often a lot of tables that will be D6 tables. So you'll need D6s for damage, I think, for weapons, as well as rolling on tables for character generation. And then the D20 is for all the other tests. And they're golden rule that they reinforce. And I think this is a good thing to say up front, because they are, simplifying rules and kind of paying homage. It's an homage to an earlier type of playing. So if you didn't live during that time, you may kind of miss what they're getting at with this book and with the system, but you still can have fun. Like you may not feel the nostalgia, or you may not feel the kind of callback to what they're actually talking about, but you will have fun. So their golden rule is have fun. If you're having fun, you are playing the game correctly, playing the game right. So that's I think that's a good rule, because especially the early time period, people were very focused on how to correctly play the game. And I think that still exists, even though the hobby has broadened out a lot. So the World of Warlock. So Warlock is set within a fantasy world with many of the common creatures and beings of Western fantasy literature. The implied area of the world which takes place is the vast kingdom of man. So there are elves, dwarves, and halflings in the land, and then there are the goblins, hobgoblins, and rival realms and monsters that beset the kingdom on all sides. So very standard setting for fantasy, and they almost get it right. They almost get it perfect during the character creation, how you establish this without treading on too many things that people are finding problematic nowadays. But they almost avoid that, but do fall into a few of those same kind of traps, but do keep clarifying. So the kingdom is beset by these goblins and hobgoblins and rival realms and monsters, and worse still, there is a traitor warlock. So the titular warlock has escaped and attempts to trap him, and is still at large. So he's wrecking ruin with his dark magics and drawing goblins and other fouler creatures to his service. So the look and the feel of this kingdom of Warlock is a late to early Renaissance level. So the costume and look of it will be late medieval to early Renaissance. And so the Warlock and dark magic then already introduces kind of chaos and evil sorcery into this. So what you're opposed to is evil dark magic, and you're preserving the kingdom, and it is the kingdom of man, and that they're humans. And so that is what they even talk about in early D&D, is that the focus, this is a human-centric setting, and you do have other humanoid communities like elves and dwarves and halflings, but it is the rise of humanity that we're in the midst of, and the other races. Then I just stepped in it with the word. The other races are the other races are diminishing, and kind of like in the Tolkien setting, the world is becoming less magic. So it's the rise of man and the fall of all of the other more magical communities, is what they call them in Warlock. Which is a good word to use. I think they did well with that. So let's take a look at the creating characters section. So there's going to be examples of the types of characters in the story. So there'll be spot illustrations. They don't always line up. So when they're talking about certain classes or certain types of characters, they don't always line up with the illustrations, but you'll have a lot of examples of different illustrations, and very, very much like something you would draw in your notebook when you're not paying attention in class in the late 70s, early 80s. All right. So explaining, the characters are your alter ego. And basically the thing that it takes from fighting fantasy is the 2-stat system. So that's been picked up by a lot of indie RPG producers as well, is coming up with just two kind of counter things, or two things that function, mechanics that function in the world, and then everything else is explained through skills or something else. And that's very similar to what they're doing here. So characters are defined by their skills, their stamina, and their luck. So the only two actual stats they have are stamina and luck. And those are, generated from dice rolls, and everything else is kind of chosen, and then, that gives you other options for skills. So you get a set, and I'm going to probably have to flip back and forth between this and the character sheet. That was something that I didn't like. Their explanation, they didn't put a small example of the character sheet and point to different parts of it to kind of give you, it is simple. They don't really need to go that specific, because it's a very uncomplicated character sheet. But you had to flip back and forth to see kind of what they meant, because you didn't quite have an idea of what the adventuring skills were and things yet. So you have 32 skills available. And so all characters are competent. And that's the thing that they keep reinforcing in basically all role-playing. If you're an adventurer, you're leaving your community, you're going outside, you're going above and beyond. Maybe you've trained above and beyond what a normal person would have for this adventure. So you're going to be more competent, and that's always reflected in skill levels and your different attributes. So 10 of those skills are marked as a level 6, and 10 more are marked as 5, and then all the rest, so the remaining, 12 are level 4. So the lowest that any skill is going to be is a level 4 when you're starting out, and different things will affect that. So stamina. So stamina is basically your health, fitness, and all-around vitality. So it's your hit points, and it's a currency to power magic. It's everything, right? So when a character runs out of stamina, then you roll for an injury. And the lower your stamina goes below 0, the better a chance that your injury is going to be life-threatening or very debilitating. So basically, like a lot of more recent games, you're kind of out of a scene or out of action until your stamina is brought back up somehow, and you suffer a critical injury. So then the party kind of has to figure out, once enough people are kind of out of the fight because they're down in stamina, either rejuvenate them and get them back up with a chance of them really being hurt or possibly killed. So the more times you completely run out of stamina, the closer you'll be to actually dying. So to generate your stamina, it's a 2d6 plus 12. And then luck, the other stat, and this is I've seen this in other games as well, and I really like that they used it. And also, I think it's a fighting fantasy trope as well. But your character's destiny and fate are represented by luck. And at any time during the game session, the game master can ask you to try your luck. And there's different reasons to try luck, for breaking ties and for avoiding death and things. You can roll against your luck, and your luck roll, or your luck attribute, is 1d6 plus 7. So your stamina has a possibility of being 14 to 24, and your luck is anywhere from 8 to 13. And luck is something that you spend. So every time, not spend, but every time you roll, you're depleted 1 luck. But that's only for the game session. So during one game session, you have this pool of luck, or this number of tests of luck that you can try. And I think being out of luck doesn't affect your character directly. It just means you can no longer make luck rolls, because it's impossible. It's impossible to actually succeed. Well, I guess not completely impossible, but it's very difficult to actually succeed. So when you're out of luck, luck rolls are going to be very daunting. So communities. So this is a good choice of word. I like kin as well, folk. There's a lot of new takes on races that sound less biological and avoid some of the pitfalls. And so 4 communities within the kingdom, and they're very standard. So none of them have bonuses, like pluses or minuses to stats. And that's where people start talking about, racial different. If you're using races and you're saying different races are differently abled, some are more intelligent, some are stronger, some are faster, then that's when, you step in it, and everybody gets, there's problems in more recent times with that usage. So we're talking about communities. The default character community in the setting is human, but all of the other communities that you can come from in the kingdom will impose some social restrictions or grant some benefits, but it's all storytelling based. It's all based on kind of personality or kind of the history of the interactions. So it's certain groups not liking other groups, certain groups having a reputation. And it's not actually physical, it's not biology that we're talking about that makes things different. And basically it's in the description of your community, but it doesn't have to be that way. And a fun thing that you could actually do with this game is say, well, I am a human from a dwarf that was raised in a dwarven community, or I'm a halfling that was raised as a human. So you don't have the behaviors or the things that they're talking about. You act in and think of yourself more like a human, so there won't be any of the the things that they talk about in the different communities. So we'll take a look at those. So choosing to play human gives no benefits or restrictions, and they're a dominant part of the kingdom. You will fit in and be treated as normal. It's a little funky, but it means that the default, you're the most common, and people just are expecting to see plenty of humans. All right. And I said they're bright, adaptable, resourceful, aspiring to nobility, but all too often destined to disappoint. So elf is the other community, so part of the ancient community of elves, natives to a distant land and deep woods. And they're rare enough in the kingdom that your presence will be remarked upon. And like humans, they think like humans with two differences. Of course, they live for a very long time, grow old very slowly, and they value art above all else. So that will kind of inform how you would play your character a little bit more. So if you're destroying statuary or something, maybe the elf would be a little put off about that, because it would see much more of the value. And also the long life would change the way that you would think about things and think about your mortality. And I think when they do describe these races, they're actually describing them from the point of view, because it is a human-centric game, they're describing these from a point of view of humanity. So this is what the human eye sees. So they say elves are beautiful and graceful and can see in the moonlight as well as in the day. However, they are treated with mild suspicion by most folk and can often develop a contempt for lesser fellows. So they see themselves as above the other communities. And so people can be suspicious of them, and they can also come across as arrogant. So there's a little bit to inform how you would interact with the other communities. The dwarf, stout-hearted dwarves, are common. Tenacious, hardy, and willful, prone to greed and quick anger, slow to friendship, but firm in loyalty. So like humans, but with the difference, they are concerned with the making of things more than the thing itself, and consider honor and respect most important thing in life. So they say that they're smaller and stockier, happiest under stone and stubborn as rock, but that doesn't affect any of their physicality. It doesn't affect any of the skills they can take or anything else. So there's no physical differences. But where was it? I think it was starting in Dwarves. So they did okay word-wise and explaining everything, firm in loyalty. Of the other races, and then right away they say races. So yeah, and these have always been known as the fantasy races of fantasy role-playing, but I think they did a good job avoiding that. But right here, because they should have just repeated communities or members of communities or fellows. I thought they did a good job using fellows here, but they kind of stepped in it saying race and unpacked that baggage. So halflings are small, full of heart, and are the most accepted race. So that is definitely human, centric. I mean, they are seen as, fitting in the most, because they have a difficulty seeing halflings. So halflings have the ability to hide because they appear to be children. And so that means that halflings tend to act like children, impulsive, quick to tantrum if they don't get their ways, and also forget, but also easily or quickly forget past slights. So there's some personality right there to play with for them to be childish and not very serious about things. And so they have the ability to move silently and be unseen by larger folk. That doesn't mechanically play into things, but I think that's kind of how you can think of your interacting, because you are the smallest. You'll be physically the smallest person. All right, so we have our stamina, we have our luck, and we picked our community. And now the career skills. So the careers and skills. So the career is, kind of your class, and your skills are like what we saw before, where we gave them all a starting value of 6, 5, or 4. This is the what you do to earn your keep in the kingdom. So to determine your career, which is basically your class, but it's more like, so this is where the Warhammer Fantasy kind of influence comes in, because you're starting as a very lowly worker in the kingdom. You're part of something very small. You're starting at the bottom of the ladder. You work in very menial a menial job, and but that's the beginning of and probably why you want to become an adventurer, is to get away from this boring life. So you roll. So to determine your career, you roll a d6 4 times, and then take a look on the table on page 21, and that will give you 4 options. So that's 4 results of careers, and then you pick one of those 4. So you're not limited. If you have an idea that you want to play, somebody less physical, more intellectual, or somebody more stealthy, or somebody more fighty, one of those 4 options should give you what you want. It should be there. Unless you roll really unlucky, you should be able to get what you are kind of looking for, or at least start in the direction. So you pick one of those careers. So each career lists possessions that you get, and you'll also get kind of a default adventurer's kit as well to start out with. But there's no encumbrance rules. I mean, you could add them if you love encumbrance, but there's no encumbrance rules, and and basic equipment doesn't have stats. Basically, weapons have damage, and equipment has a value if you're buying it, but it's a little bit more abstracted and simplified. So you can roll on some tables then with your career to give you a little bit of background. And this is the kind of Powered by the Apocalypse kind of skin or playbook kind of effect that I was talking about. We'll take a look at that when we see the careers. And so you'll add a bit of color to your background, so give you some names or some things that are going on with you that are appropriate to your career. And then the career also gives you a list. I believe there's 5 adventuring skills. And then it tells you the maximum levels that career can have. And then you will have 2. So you tick the box on the character sheet for the 2 different skill levels. So you have a maximum value. And then, of course, you're starting out with your kind of minimum allotted. And we'll see that on the character sheet. I'm going to flip to that, I think, sooner rather than later. So when you create your character, you can assign 10 levels. So you already have those starting levels, those 4, 5, 6 starting levels. And then the listing, the skills listed in your career, you have another 10 levels to add to that, paying attention to the maximum. And so keep the starting values and then add to your career skills up to, and kind of focusing on the types of things you want your character to be good at. And then, so once you've assigned those 10 points, then you take a look at those 5 skills and you average you take an average rounding up of those 5 skills, and that's your career skill. So because you can change careers in this game, they want you to keep track of how far you've progressed in a specific career before you've done that. And it kind of adds a generic skill. So say you're a watchman or a rat catcher or something, and some situation in the game would apply very broadly to your career because of your competency or because that's the job that you do. It would apply broadly to your career. You will roll your career skill instead of a very specific adventuring skill like dodge or sense or something. So we'll take a look at those as well. Yeah, there's so much yet to come. All right, and so you take that average and write that as your career skill, and that can change. You can change careers, so it's important to have that value recorded because when you change your career, that goes away, or you calculate it differently. So there are a lot of adventuring skills that you're not going to basically be able to improve based on your career. So that would mean that's why you would want to change your career, because if you don't like the cap that the ability to use a sword has in your career, but everything else is good, then you'd want to change your career to something that gives you a little bit more ability to upgrade that. So and then there's also advanced careers, which comes up later. So the adventuring skills. So here's a description of everything. So there's 32 of these skills, and they basically correspond to the feats or the kind of specific the things that have kind of always existed in tabletop roleplay for your characters, and they're basically exactly what you would think they are just from the name. So appraise is to kind of, judge a situation. Athletics is anything physical. Bargain is being able to, negotiate with people. Blunt is blunt weapons, and bow and crossbow have specific skills. So you're not trained in ranged, but a specific weapon which doesn't exist for the other weapon types. But bow and crossbow are specific skills. Brawling is just fighting. Command is leadership. Diplomacy, negotiations, disguise, dodge. So dodge is what's opposed to any ranged attack. And I'm sorry, what was it? It's not appraise. It's coming up. So dodge. Endurance is physical hardiness that goes beyond what other characters can do. History is a knowledge of the kingdom. Incantation is the magic skill. So you need to build your incantation level to be able to so everyone can try to cast a spell. Everyone will, they at least have a minimum 4 in incantation. So everyone can try to cast a spell. And the chances that they will successfully do that are very low, but incantation is what feeds, or what gives you the magic ability. Intimidate, to be physically or personally intimidating to other people. Languages. So large blade is swords and one-handed and two-handed swords. So large blade covers your ability with a sword, a larger than a dagger sword. Lie is deception. Medicine is the only healing skill, and so it's the ability to stabilize wounds and critical hits that were suffered in combat, so without medical assistance. So we'll take a look at the it's simple, but we'll take a look at like how that would work, because you can do that in combat as well. Navigation is finding your way. Ostler is horsemanship. Persuasion is more so not intimidation, not negotiation, not diplomacy. It's convincing somebody of something. Polearm is the spears or any long-handled weapon. Repair is to perform kind of ad hoc temporary repairs on devices and tools. Sleight of hand is the kind of the thief and street skill. To use distraction and manipulation, picking pockets and cheating cards. Small blades is daggers. So large blades and small blades are two separate skills. Spot is what is opposed to stealth, or was opposed to hiding. Oh, they're right next to each other. So stealth is the ability to hide and cover in shadows, and that is when you're opposing that role, you oppose stealth with spot. So those two are kind of counter to each other. So if you have a character able to spot things well, they won't be surprised by stealth, and vice versa. Streetwise is the friends on the street, knowing your way around. Survival is wilderness. Swimming, of course. Thrown. So this is interesting because you have small blades, but then many small blades and also long blades. Spears can be thrown. So a stone, a javelin, or a tomato. So anything that you're going to throw, and then there's a picture of a dagger right there. Anything that you're going to throw would use this skill instead of the small blade skill. So you kind of have to do both depending on if you want to make your small weapons a ranged attack. All right, so the career skill. So like I was saying, you do that average of the set of skills, the 5 skills that are offered by your career. You average that for the career skill. It represents all the knowledge and know-how from working in that profession. So if you're trying to do something that really isn't covered by one of those skills that we just looked at, those adventuring skills like stealth or spot, or none of that really applies, you can do a more general career skill and just see what because you're basically adding the benefit of some sort of training. And so this is a very broad career training, so it will apply to many things. So basically, if you can persuade the game master that your career skill makes sense in the context of the test, then you would roll with that instead of an adventuring skill. And there's the basic equipment. So your career gives you equipment, plus you get 2d6 silver coins. And they'll talk about the money soon. A backpack, 3d3 days of food, water skin, eating knife, clothes, and boots. All right, and here are our list of careers. So this is the table that you roll 4 times on. So it's a oh, that's right, but it's separated into 4 sections. That's right. So you're rolling 4 times, and there's 4 sets of 6. So it's not at first I thought it was a d66, which is a very, Warhammer Fantasy thing. But it is like 4 instances of 6, and then that will give you 1 choice of each of these groups. So the careers are agitator, beggar, boatman, bodyguard, bounty hunter, entertainer, footpad, gambler, grave robber, hunter, initiate, mercenary, militiaman, miner, noble, outlaw, peddler, raconteur, rat catcher, road warden, soldier, thief, tomb robber, and wizard's apprentice. So the only 2 magical careers, the beginning magical careers, as I said, anybody can use magic, but just not reliably and well. The wizard's apprentice and the initiate. Initiate is the initiate in the priesthood, or in a religious group. So each listing of the careers gives you a basic description, the adventuring skills of the career, so those skills and their maximum level, and then possessions of the career. So let's take a look at the agitator. So there's the 5 skills. So small blade, intimidate, dodge, persuasion, and streetwise. So 3 of them have a cap of 12 and then 2 a cap of 10. So you spend your time stirring things up, digging into the psyche of the mob and twisting it to your ends. You are a good speaker, good at manipulating people and at prodding the sore spots. That grain riot in Goldenback, that was you. You had something to do with the burning of the warehouse on the shores of the River Eld, some say. You don't comment. So basically, what, rabble rouser, I guess, could be an alternative title. So the equipment is a notched dagger, leather jerkin, which is light armor, pamphlets, seditious writings, a bottle of grog that you can set on fire, if you had to. So yeah, like a Molotov cocktail, basically. So this is the to give you the flavor of your character, and kind of, so once you've got those 4 options, you'd probably read through each of these descriptions and say, do I want to play something like this? Is this my, origin? Is this where I come from? And then once you decide on a career, then there's 2 d6 rolls that you make, and they'll each be like completing a sentence. So who you've worked for in the past, so you roll a d6, and it's either a crime gang, the mayor's rival, a cult, a trade house, someone called the Knife, or you don't know, which is worrying. And this is the thing that reminded me of the skins or playbooks from Powered by the Apocalypse, because it makes a decision, or it kind of gives you some background. It fills in some background and lets you, kind of have some details that then you can use to interact with the world and interact with the other characters. And so because they do, give specific names of gangs or, certain politicians or, incidents that have happened, that does start to color in the world. And maybe the game master, wants to kind of do an original world build. So you may or may not want to use specific. I mean, basically the idea you could go with from that role, but you may not want to use the specific names depending on how you've decided to play. But a lot of it is kind of peripheral enough that it may not, really even matter what things are called or what, because it may not come up again and it's not going to connect. It may not connect to anything. And the other question is, who is hunting you? The guard, the guild, the church, your brother, the goblin band, or you don't know, which is worrying. And there's another, nice negotiation illustration. So here's more examples. And so they show you the roll, basically. So the of your first roll, this is the first result, second result. So that the 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 tells you what the roll is. So you don't have to keep referring back to the table. You can actually just roll and then look it up because they number them in that way. And so everyone's got equipment and their 5 skills. And so you would take an average of those 5 skills, and that would be your boatman skill. You take an average of the 5 bodyguard skills, and that's your bodyguard career skill. And like I said, that's a general test or general skill you may use for some tests. All right. And as you could tell, some of the professions actually seem kind of useful, or like you know, a bounty hunter would give you certain skills and certain abilities. A footpad, you know, possibly, you know, you could say that it gives you abilities to, you know, steal better or know who a sucker is. And a gambler, you know, what might let you move in different circles, social circles. But there's some things, you know, like grave robber or a rat catcher, or things that, yeah, seem a lot more lowly. Like you grow up, or the, it was there, yeah. So militiaman, miner, yeah, miner would be like a more lowly. You're coming from, you know, that profession, so you know underground and things, but you're not going to be incredibly respected. You know, unlike a noble. So if you had to choose between miner and noble, I don't know. Depends on how you'd want to play, but you know, kind of have to look at what skills that's going to give you or allow you to increase, and how you want to play. So yeah, the interesting thing, I thought this was an interesting detail. So if you play a peddler, you have a horse. So that's the only, I think it's the only profession that gives you a horse. To start out with, you have a horse and a cart. And otherwise, I think you'd have to, most professions, even if you're an ostler, you have the ostler skill, I think you have to buy a horse. So those are all of the skills, and they're very reminiscent of what you're kind of offered in the starting levels of Warhammer Fantasy. And so the game, because you're starting in a lowly position, and the game kind of, like Fighting Fantasy and like Warhammer Fantasy, the game is deadly. So you may not last long, and you may never make it out of this career, even though you can change careers, and even though you can, you know, acquire wealth and adventure, you may not be doing it for long, because it can be a very deadly game. Because you just, if you're very unlucky, you run out of stamina in your first battle, and you roll death. It's very easy for that to just be the end of your character. But they're easy to create, so that helps. So another thing that they do, so once you have all of that established, you have all of your equipment, you've chosen all of your skill levels, you've determined the level of your career skill, they want you to add 3 basically adjectives, so character traits that describe your character. And this is also to help in role play, and it's the kind of things that come up with, you know, background or bonds, and trying to think of some of the other things that they're called in other games. You know, you have links between other characters and things that help you role play, but also just, you know, things like being charming or being childish or whatever. It helps the other players know what to expect, like know what they're gonna do. Nice. But so here's some examples. You can also make up your own, but here's a, you know, big example list of everything. Yes. Yes, Allagash. I made a comment about that at the beginning. The font choice is interesting, and I think it was done for nostalgic purposes. Because I had the PDF, and then I ordered the book, and I was like, yeah, wow, why did I need a physical copy of this font? But I think they're trying to harken back to the typewriter written, you know, early rules of the beginning of tabletop role playing, and then also the very early on, you know, text-based PC role playing games, and this choice is like somewhere in between there. It's somewhere between a typewriter font and a computer font, and so it does. It's odd because it does take you out of the fantasy. Like, it doesn't look like, you know, something handwritten on parchment or something. It does take you out of the fantasy, but I think it's a deliberate choice. Like, I think there's a deliberate nostalgia choice there. And yeah, I had the same reaction. That same thing occurred to me when I first saw that. I was like, oh, okay, what are we doing here? And so, yeah, that's true. But if you have the PDF, you could select all and change the font if you wanted to just print it yourself. But yeah, that's true. It is an interesting choice, and it's funny that they also did a sci-fi setting for this, because I think this feels like nostalgic sci-fi a little bit more to me, and it is very kind of typewriter. It's not easy to read. Just like a Times, New Roman or something would be much gentler on the eyes. But I think it's a choice, and all of those choices kind of do gatekeep who is going to want to play the game. All right, and so they talk about the money. So you start off with what, D6, 2d6 silver. So they do pennies, basically copper, silver, and gold. And so 10 pennies make a silver, 10 silvers make a gold, pretty standard. And they use those different coins, and I thought this was interesting. So pennies are for commoners. Most things that peasants buy and sell only cost pennies. Silver is the currency of artisans, traders, and the middle class. Most things you buy and sell for daily life cost silver. And gold is the currency of the nobles and upper class. Things they buy and sell cost gold. So instantly it can divide things in value and quality. So I thought that was a real simple, elegant way to kind of, just create the strata, the classes in this world. And there are things, you start off with silvers, you start off, working class, and there's things that are going to be gold you're not going to be able to afford. And, upgrades and things. And also that also applies into that comes into play also with the advanced careers. So advanced careers, you're going to need to buy things that are gold or of fine quality that will cost gold. And so I think that's a nice way to separate things right off and kind of get your mind in that setting of there are these classes of people in this world. So you start out with silver. It represents how much money you've scraped together in your life so far, and all is left for all that is left of a bigger sum, depending on what your career is. If you started out well and failed, or if you started at the very bottom and worked your way up. So here's their list of common items, and so things don't have a specific value; they have a D6 roll, right? So commoners might be able to buy things that cost D6 pennies, middle class D6 silver, and aristocrats D6 gold. Better quality, higher workmanship adds a D6 or 2d6 to the cost. Rarity also influences prices. So a buried treasure map will cost gold, not pennies, as an example. So metal weapons and armor always cost at least 2d6 for poor quality, 3d6 for normal quality. And so your character equipment is actually described as a rusted sword, or there'll be conditions on your sword or on your equipment that will kind of give you a sense of these grades. So they give you a list, and so basically you roll a d6, and I kind of like that in that abstract way, because you get a real bad deal on a rope. You want to buy some rope, and this guy's charging you 6 pennies for rope. So I like the kind of randomness of it, and that's kind of also what you would run into amongst different merchants. So these are all the kind of common items that are acquired for pennies, and then they tell you if it actually would be a 2d6 instead. So a light bow is a common item, but it's not 1d6, it's 2d6 pennies. So these there are certain things, just like when you're sometimes in a dollar store and some things cost $2. It's that kind of idea. And so the silver items, of course, are the more useful items for adventuring. A thieves' toolkit, disguise, heavy bow. Of course, a heavy bow is 2d6. So those sorts of things. And the upper class items, an accurate map. I like that. You got to pay gold for a map that works. Chainmail, fine jewelry, materials for magic, navigation tools, plate armor, poison, rich clothes, a sextant, a two-handed sword or two-handed weapon, and a warhorse. And remember, the cost goes up if you want a high quality. So that's a bad quality 2d6 gold weapon, and you'd have to add to that to improve the quality. All right, and the gods. So they run through some basic gods, so that they avoid setting as much as possible. But since we are already talking about priests and initiates and things as a class, they want to just give you a little bit of flavor of gods in this kingdom. And of course, if you're going to actually just play use the system to play Warhammer Fantasy, then you'd probably go with the gods of Sigmar and the Chaos gods and the things that would be in that setting. But here's some examples that you can use if you're just doing kind of very generic, keeping things very open and just kind of world building as you go. So the thrice blessed is the official god. So the 3 parts of the mind, the heart comes from the clergy, the head and might of the military orders, and the soul is the priests who wield magic. the Red King, so a blood god. The Wildwood, the god of the elves. The Heartstone, the dwarven god. And the dragon, officially illegal, so I'm sure there will be dragon cults. The dragon is the main god of the goblins and hobgoblins. Alright, so now we get into the system. No, I totally get it. Yeah, I totally get it about the the font. Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, those are considerations when you're designing a game, you know, from the art to the layout of the book to everything, because the market is so full. There are so many games, so many people trying to get attention to their games, and so many groups that you only have limited chances of getting things to the table. You have to get a consensus. You have to show people a book or a rule set, and everybody has to say, yeah, okay, that sounds okay, let's play that. And if you handed somebody, you know, this book, there may be some people that's like, I'm not going to read that book because I hate that font. And so there are a lot of things that you do have to be careful of, because yeah, like you're saying, if the font is a deal breaker, that is that's going to hurt, you know, how many groups are actually going to be playing the game. And it's a shame. It's a funny thing for them to do, you know, risking, because I think, you know, printed material, that's a huge thing you have to pay attention to, is ease of, you know, kind of consuming the written word, because people need to get through it as easily as possible. So also the writing style, like the kind of tone of your writing is important as well, because some of the early D&D writing was so crazy. They just there were so many tangents and so much distraction, and they were trying to be colorful and flavorful and kind of, you know, replicate how you'd be talking around a table. But when you just want the information, you want to hear the mechanics, you want to, you know what to do in this game. If there's too much flavor and color of just a distracting way, that becomes very annoying as well, and that's easily a deal breaker if you can't get the actual mechanics out of the rules, because they're telling stories and you know, being all colorful with their examples. Okay, so now we got a character. So here are the rules. So taking an action. So, you know, like most games instruct, if it's nothing that has huge consequence, it's not going to be difficult or dangerous, you just do it, right? And you know, if you want to, you know, you need to keep the story moving. You don't want to say, okay, you see two doors and, you know, make a roll for which one looks better to you. You don't want every single thing to, there's so many things that won't invoke the mechanics that are just part of the storytelling, right? So they're saying if an action is difficult, dangerous, or has a risk of failure and then consequences, that would represent risk that would trigger the mechanics, the dice roll of the game. So any of those things are resolved. Any risk or the failure of consequence is decided by making a skill test. So in Warlock, so it's a d20 that you're rolling. So that's different because I believe Fighting Fantasy is d6 and 2d6. And Warhammer Fantasy is percentile, right? It's a d100. So they decided to go with the d20, and I think it's kind of, you know, it is an iconic, because of Dungeons and Dragons, it's an iconic tabletop, and I think it works well because it gives you a really big range of success and failure. You know, things often go bad as often as they go good, and so that's what they went with. So it goes away, goes away from the origin of their nostalgia, but it does, you know, for most people kind of worldwide, still feels very nostalgic. A D20 is still the old school. All right, so everything you attempt where failure advances the story as much as success is resolved in a skill test. So there are two ways that you roll skill tests, depending on what you're trying to do. So the basic test is a d20 roll plus your skill, and the measure of success is a 20 or more. So you have to get as close to 20 as possible. So when you see the skills that are only adding 4, so your lowest level for an adventuring skill is a 4, so it'd be a +4 to your roll. So that means you have to at least get a 16 to be successful if your skill level is only a 4 with the 20 success. So right away you can see how single-digit skill levels are going to make things rather difficult. You're going to have to be rolling really well in most cases. And for these just basic tests, the Game Master can also impose penalties of 2 or 4 to that skill. So you need a 22 or a 24, basically, to succeed if it would be more difficult. So a D20 success, or a 20 on a D20 is a success. So it's the roll plus your skill. And then there's our opposed tests. So combat and a lot of things will be an opposed roll. So if an action you're trying to perform is directly opposed by another individual or group, and such that the outcome each desires are mutually exclusive and only one can succeed, that is resolved with an opposed skill test. So both the participants roll a d20 and add their skill, the higher total wins. So you don't have to roll a success. You don't have to roll a 20, you just got to beat the other guy. In the case of a draw, the conflict was a draw, unless that doesn't work, and then re-roll. And then you can also, I think they say later, you can also use a luck test to break that tie. So if one character in the conflict has a significant advantage over the other, then the Game Master can impose the same penalty of 2 or 4 to the roll. So, and I don't think the difference does come into play if it's a huge difference, and we'll see that in a little bit. But so d20 plus your skill level, and highest one wins. There we go. So testing your luck. So anytime the Game Master can ask you to test your luck to avoid an unfortunate occurrence. So you may choose to perform a standard test using your luck value as the skill. If you pass, you avoid the situation. If not, well, bad luck. In any case, you deduct 1 from your luck score for the rest of the adventure. So every time that you test your luck, it goes down by 1. So if you have a very high luck, initial starting luck, you can't just rely on that constantly. You can't just keep leaning on that, because it does deplete. So at the beginning of the game, or early on in the session, you're going to be able to take advantage of that, but quickly it's going to deplete. So it is always the player's choice to test luck if they don't have to, if they don't want to. So so that the GM can ask, and the players can refuse, especially if your luck is down to 1 or whatever. If your luck is very bad, then you can decide not to test it. And then testing luck in opposed tests. If an opposed test results in a draw, a player character may test their luck as an attempt to break that tie. If they succeed, they win. If they fail, the opponent wins. So that's that can be used as a tiebreaker, or the GM can just tell you to re-roll if a tie doesn't make any sense, like in certain physical struggles or whatever. It wouldn't make any sense. So improving. So there aren't experience points in the game. There are advances, and so the GM can really determine how fast they want the players to advance. And I think more modern players, newer players, really like to advance as quickly as possible to feel growth and feel their competency grow. So with younger or newer players, you probably want to be more generous with advances, just because. But I mean, it's also going to mean they're going to get overpowered quickly. But it also gives them something to do between sessions and feel like they're improving. So the Game Master decides at what point, either at the end of the session or at the end of some point in the campaign itself, characters are granted between 1 and 3 advances. So these can be used to increase the skill levels associated with your current career. So each one can just add 1 to a career score up to the maximum level, and then of course you're going to have to recalculate the total career score. So the adventuring skills, this is confusing. So the adventuring skills included in your career can be advanced up to that maximum. And then you always have to make sure that the average of that may also increase your career skill. So keep track of that. Yeah, so always the average of all of your skills for that career rounded up. So that is a way for you overall to gain competency, because that group of skills will continue up to a point. And so that also means, so why you pay attention to the career skill, why you're always paying attention to that average, is because when your career skill increases, your stamina also increases. So by 1. So for every 1 that your career skill increases, your stamina goes up as well. So this is a way that they represent experience getting tougher and harder, is as your all of the things that contribute to career improve you. Physically you'll improve, and then skill wise you'll improve. So the changing of careers. So to get access to something outside of those 5 advanceable skills in your career, you need to change careers. So they don't tell you how you would do this, like story-wise, narratively, how you would actually do this, which is kind of funny. So it's up to the player to decide, well, yeah, between sessions when we were, everyone was shopping for new gear, I actually went out and became a night watchman or whatever. You have to come up with a way that, how this actually happens story-wise. And so, it would happen between sessions, obviously. And to change the skill careers, you have to be able to, so that they are able to buy levels of skills in the new career, and nothing goes down. Basically, nothing that they achieved from the previous career goes down, even if the new career has different maximum levels. So that's a nice way to kind of cheat and go beyond. Some careers allow you to max things out to 12, that others only let you go up to 10. And so there's a way to, by taking complementary careers, you can then increase, multiple things that go outside of one. I hope that made sense. So you can't then, of course, increase your level of your previous career, and then that new career skill that you'll get from the average, of course, then is the thing that affects your stamina and upgrade. But and the maximum level is the same. It's not cumulative, right? So if a previous maximum level was 10 and the new career has the same skill maximum level of 10, it's still 10. It doesn't double to 20 is the example that they give. And also, if the maximum level decreases, that doesn't affect you. You get to keep that score. Nothing de-levels, basically, when you change careers. So you do retain that old career skill as well. So you say, well, remember when I was a rat catcher? Well, I'm going to roll using that skill because that would apply to this because we're in the sewer. And so now you have a new career skill that's an average of those new skills, and that's where you gain your skill increases in stamina from then on. And then onto advanced careers. So this is interesting, and this is very Warhammer Fantasy. So once you have entered 2 careers and have obtained at least 3 adventuring skills at level 10 or more, then you may enter an advanced career. So it'll take a little bit. So, I'm sorry. And the cost of changing careers is 5 advances. So you need to start kind of banking advances that you're getting instead of constantly just feeding those into your skills. You need to start banking your advances because a career skill, it's right here, sorry. A career skill will cost 5 advances. So that's more than you could possibly make from a single session, unless it's a crazy, generous GM. And the same applies with a advanced career skill. So that will also take 5, just as before. But this will then, advanced careers give you much higher maximum, caps on all of your skills. And they will also, give you different equipment, and you have to actually, the interesting thing about these is you have to accumulate required equipment before you can become one of these advanced careers. So we'll take a look. So advanced careers are shown, along with the required possessions. So once a character has entered an advanced career, they can leave it for another basic career at any time. So you can actually step down or move to a new advanced career. So you're completely mobile, but you do have to obtain the required possessions. I thought that was a very interesting detail, because it's also going to mean you're going to have a certain amount of money. So not only those advances are going to have to be saved, but your gold. So the advanced careers are assassin, bravo. So bravo is like a street fighter, watch captain, a charlatan. So you're very convincing and good at people, good for people to get people to believe you. Oh, let's look at an example too. The required equipment, if you want to become a charlatan, is a suit of fine quality clothes, which we know is going to be a lot of gold, a tall fashionable hat, and a discreet arming sword. So you have to have all of those things to even make that change, regardless of if you have all the other prerequisites. An explorer, so a traveler throughout the kingdom, so you'll need a finely crafted bow, an arming sword, navigation equipment, a tent, and camping gear. So you have to have all of that before explorer. Freelance, an armored knight. So this is going to be very costly as well. So you'll have to, and it's interesting because the high level medicine skill, and that'll come up when we take a look at combat. High-level medicine skill is not in where you would think it would be. So freelance has a high-level medicine skill, and so it's not. There aren't like dedicated healers. There are just people that are better at healing. So the only thing that's really dedicated are very combat-oriented and very magic-oriented. But some of the other skills are very spread out through various careers. A mercenary captain. Oh, did I miss one here? Oh, highwayman. Yes, highway. A robber of highways, a mercenary captain, a merchant, a minstrel, outlaw chief, priest. So there's the one advanced magic class. So you have to required equipment is at least 5 spells. And so spells are an interesting thing. How they treat magic in this is interesting as well. A habit, a jeweled hand to receive kisses. So I guess you have to have a benefactor, you have to know a pope, and benedictions, and to bestow upon your flock. Oh, jeweled hand. So I guess your hand has to be jeweled, sorry. So you need jewelry so people can kiss the ring. A scholar, a scout, a spy, a veteran soldier, and then wizard is the other advanced class. So as you see, the incantation is up to 16, and then, sorry if this is blurring too much, and both incantations are up to 16 in the advanced magic using class. So that means you can advance it up to 16, so you only have to roll only a 1 to 4 fails. So you're very reliably cast magic once you're one of those advanced classes and have maxed out. All right. So combat, a goblin on a warg here. Sorry, don't want to be scrolling too fast. I don't know how that looks. So, fights between characters and their enemies are extremely dangerous and represent swirling melee, where the risk of wounding is ever present. So this is a very different, specific style of combat that you're going to have to kind of get used to. If you're really used to how things bog down with 5e or Pathfinder or whatever, when you get into combat and how combat works and how strategic and kind of positioning based and everything it is, this is not that at all. This is very light and very abstracted, but also very deadly. So there's some things that you won't find here this combat could also be a deal breaker, I think, because there's some people that are really they want some satisfaction in combat, and that might not be here for you. But I think this is handled really well. I think this does make sense. So remember that swirling melee, because that's what they emphasize very much. So attacks between combatants are resolved as opposed tests. The winner hits the loser and inflicts damage. So note that all fights are opposed tests. So that means it's possible to suffer damage as the attacker. You get some advantage as the attacker. But defender, so you're basically striking each other at the same time, and depending on that roll, you could actually attack somebody and then be killed. So they just parry incredibly well. Right, so that is the danger of combat, so the swirling nature of melee. And also, each character will only be able to instigate combat once per round. But again, all tests are opposed, so they have the ability to afflict damage if they're attacked in the next, if another player's turn they end up being attacked, they'll still be able to. So if you attack someone, do damage, they attack you back, as a defender you could still do damage, so you could kill someone. You get 2 attacks in a round and kill someone. So rounds. in Warlock, action scenes are divided into rounds that represent about 30 seconds. So characters are controlled by players, and most enemies are controlled by the Game Master, and they get to perform one action during the round. So when they get to take their turn, note that this is abstract, and they're not actually saying, you're going to break up a 30-second chunk and each get your time. It's an actual period of time isn't really important. Just everyone in combat has to take their action, basically, and then a new round begins. So some actions would actually take longer, and so it's not super precise. It's just everyone does something. So whenever a character takes a turn, the player narrates what they're trying to do. The Game Master decides how the mechanics can be used to represent that. So who goes first? So initiative. So this is something that shows up in a lot of OSR games, a group initiative. And so basically the reason you have your D6 is you're going to do a D6 roll-off. So combat is divided into two groups, like the characters and their allies, so maybe allied NPCs, and then the enemies. So there's basically two forces against each other once you initiate combat. It is obvious who should attack first if someone surprises another. So someone will obviously have the initiative depending on the situation, but if it's not clear, if things are kind of, decided by who moves the fastest, like you're both entering combat at the same time, and it would be who, is the most capable of performing that first action, then each side rolls a d6, and then whoever is highest. So that's basically initiative. It's a group initiative, and you only have to use initiative if it's not clear that one group is surprising another or one group is not aware. So roll until one side wins, so you don't want to have a draw of initiative. So each side takes their so this is another interesting thing. So it's not everyone on one side goes, everyone on another side goes, and it's also not going to be consistently staggered. So each side takes its turn to take an action with one of its members. So it's basically, in like miniature wargaming terms, it's alternating activations between the two groups, but initiative decides which group takes the first action. So each side takes an action with one of their members. For example, if the Game Master won, then the action would be one of the combatants. And then if the players will take an action with one of their characters. So it goes back and forth between the two sides, starting with whoever surprised or whoever won the initiative. So that's a very different thing. So if you get the drop on a group with your party, everyone doesn't get a hit in before anything can happen, unless there's a very special circumstances that the GM may give you some, unguarded attack. But, basically the rules are then you just go into combat and initiate between, and alternate between the groups based on that first initiative. So you basically get one surprise attack, one surprise, combat action. All right, so followed by a second enemy. So you just keep alternating, and if one side has more members, then they'll, get a few more attacks at the end there. So you want to probably even the numbers as soon as possible. All right. So you choose the action. So and that's they also talk about, so instead of everyone declaring the same thing at the same time and declaring what their action is going to be all at the same time, the concept of simultaneous action, the strategy comes in Warlock by the party kind of negotiating, okay, you go first and do this, and then I'll do this, and then you do that. And that makes the most sense, that, all focusing on the same target or all doing something that, kind of combines well in your actions. So when a side has a turn with one of their combatants, they can choose any character or any enemy that has not already taken action to take that round. And the choice can be tactical. So they say that the players are encouraged to discuss their plans and make the most of their options. So they allow discussion, and that kind of, that goes outside the realism of like the immediacy of combat, but it lets you, because it is abstracting to such a extent, it allows you to kind of have fun and have a good battle plan. And that's the strategy. Instead of positioning and tactical things like that, the strategy would come from, basically your attack order and hopefully being able to defeat foes before, they would have the ability to respond. And they also say some monsters can make multiple attacks in a round. So that means the GM gets to select them multiple times. So your combat actions. So on your turn, you perform one action. So the action of the character can include anything that the game master agrees is achievable within 10 seconds, including moving, engaging in combat, and casting a spell. So moving. So when they do these bold, this is always very important when they do these bold paragraphs, because it means this is something very different that you may not have ever dealt with before, or this is one of the oddities. They could have almost put this in a box, maybe. This is one of the oddities of our game system, so pay attention, and this is going to decide whether you like their combat or not. So in Warlock, move up to 10 feet cautiously as part of an action. This is the easiest way to think of the combatants, the distance they can move. So crossing a room as a part of their action. This can be done before or after, but not during the action. So within action. So you get a 10-foot move basically with your action. So if your action, depending on what your action is, and I guess you can also move and then use your action as more moving, as in changing. Well, we'll talk about that, like changing your total position. So importantly, combatants are able to move out of engagement with another combatant at any time with no penalty. So there's no attacks of opportunity. There's no being locked in melee. So this represents the swirling and mobile nature of melee. There is no penalty for withdrawing from a fight. So to kind of balance the fact that combat is very deadly and you don't have a lot of, HP, you can't take a lot of hits. You're allowed to kind of jump in and out of combat and to flee as soon as there's, as soon as you think that your character is in too much danger, or the party, needs to retreat and regroup. So the move action here's the talk about distances. So combatants can also move as their whole action. So in Warlock, distances are abstract, and this has happened. I think Forbidden Lands does this as well, and a few other systems. I think this is basically how they do it. So you can use miniatures on a table and kind of keep track of like range bands, but you're not on a grid. You're not keeping track of like squares in a corridor or anything. So distances are abstract and measured on a scale relative to the character. So compared to characters, places, objects, characters are either close. Oh, here we go. These are their distances. Close, nearby, far away, or distant. So if you consider a building, close would be in the same room, nearby would be in the next room, far away would be in the same street, distant would be in another street. So characters with that action move action, the characters can move between one of those ranges. So you can go from close to near, from far away to distant, and then weapon ranges are measured in that same way. So they say miniatures can be used for that relative position, and I found that I found that quite useful, because the individual players can kind of keep track of where their character is. But I think the first session we ever played at Forbidden Lands, there's only 3 of us, and so the 2 players were playing 2 characters each, and so it got a little bit difficult to remember. Okay, what range were they at? Were they still far, or they come near that previous round? So having miniatures and basically kind of determining, bases touching is close, nearby is within 2 inches, within 6 inches is far, and then, or I'm forgetting, far and then distant. To do close and nearby, and just have it basically visually represented as just kind of how to keep track, as opposed to cards or whatever. But it's not essential, they say, of course, miniatures. So the melee attack. And here's the deadliness. Of course, there's another bolded paragraph. So here we go. The melee attack and how this works. So a character initiates an opposed skill test against an opponent by adding their skill with their weapon that they are using. Whoever wins the conflict does the damage die of their weapon and inflicts that stamina loss. And if they bring that stamina to 0, a potential critical effect. So importantly, the combatant who's initiated the attack gains 5 to their skill. So if your large blade skill is 10, it's actually a 15 if you're the attacker. So you have to roll very, very badly as an attacker to be wounded by a defender, but it is possible because they are giving you a bonus of 5. But if you completely botch the roll, you could be hurt as a result of the melee. So note, all characters, although characters that initiate the attack on the enemy either can be injured as a result, but the combat is, of course, weighed in favor of the attacker. So fortune favors the brave. So they're also not making a system that encourages you to turtle. You know, nobody's going to attack because you can get hurt when you attack. So they give you the advantage so that the fortune will favor the brave. All right, and then ranged attack. Here's another thing that might turn people off. Should a character shoot at an enemy with a bow or vice versa, when the attempt is resolved as a conflict pitting the attacker's appropriate bow skill against the target's dodge. So it's an opposed roll, bow versus dodge, and or crossbow versus dodge, or throw versus dodge. If the range is close or nearby, the roll is normal. If it's far away, the game master may impose a penalty of 5 on the score. And so that also means, because there is no engagement, there's just ranges that you can shoot into combat if people are attacking each other, because people are jumping in and out of combat, so nobody's technically tied down by melee. So you can shoot at enemies that are engaged in melee. And if a defender is aware of the attacker, shields can also be added to the total of the dodge. So -3 for small shields and 5 for large shields. So if you're equipped with a shield and you're holding it and you see this guy's going to shoot at you, you're allowed to include that in your roll to dodge. All right. So on a successful hit, the attacker rolls the damage die, as with melee combat, and the target wins the conflict if they escape unarmed. Yeah. So the target, if they succeed, there's just no harm done. So weapons and damage rolls. So here's all of the stats for when you hit. So this is another interesting thing that kind of goes along with the how they divided the money. So talking about the class just within the money system, and weapons also, kind of create a certain perception and are going to cause you to not be able to do certain things, or kind of be blockaded. So there are casual and martial weapons. So casual weapons include daggers and arming swords, which can be carried in many places without comment. Heavier, deadlier weapons are classed as martial weapons and would indicate that the bearer is a soldier or a warrior of some kind and best avoided. So as such, martial weapons are banned in most civilized areas. Each type of weapon does a particular type of damage, and reference that damage on the chart. So yeah, if it's listed, so they list the type. So you can't just carry your crossbow around, maybe in the marketplace if there are not soldiers. You are not a soldier of the realm or an official soldier of the kingdom. So that creates an interesting situation where you're going to have to disarm or stow your weapons or something, depending on what situations you're entering, because you can't just carry your pole arm with you when you visit the mayor of the village or whatever. So I like that. I think that will add some decision making to the party and might be much more fun. So everything has a d6 for damage, and either a plus or a minus or nothing. And then they also have a type of damage. So this affects the critical roll. So how you are attacked, or with the type of weapon you're attacked with that brings your stamina down to 0 will determine the kind of critical injury you could take, because a crushing weapon, of course, would injure you differently from a piercing weapon or a slashing weapon. So basically it gives you the details of your demise if your head was crushed or you were run through by a blade. So mighty strike. So here's the only time that you need to pay attention to the difference between the rolls. So if a winner of a melee or ranged conflict obtains more than 3 times the results, so yeah, triple the results of the defender on their attack roll, they achieve a mighty strike, or a critical hit is probably how you're used to seeing it. So roll the damage die to determine stamina loss, and add any modifiers as usual, and double it. So it's double damage for a crit. So armor. So armor deducts from stamina loss. So There's different classes of armor. So it's basically, there's just a few types of armor, and they each deduct a certain amount. So light is a D3, modest armor is a D6, and heavy is 2D6. And then shields are part of armor. And in your description of your career, they usually say you have this, this, and this. That is modest armor. So that also means that if you want to downgrade your armor, so that would basically, if you have heavy armor, but there would be some reason why you need to carry less or look less like a knight, you can strip down to like the next level of armor. So you could go from heavily armored to modestly armored by removing everything but the breastplate and the helmet or something, or the greaves. So modest armor, such as a breastplate, greaves, or vambrace, and some chain would raise eyebrows in the city or polite company. So you may be encouraged, just like with the martial weapons, to strip down your armor to modest in certain situations, because being a fully armored knight in some situations may not be acceptable unless you're serving that particular ruler. Let's see. And so similarly, shields are not carried in public because they are military equipment. And effects of damage. So here we go. This is their stamina system. So no hit points. It's all stamina, and it is one of the few stats that you've rolled at the beginning, and that can only grow when your career skill grows. So when the buffer of stamina is gone, you risk a permanent or long-lasting injury and possible death. So this isn't quite as grisly as what I remember from Warhammer Fantasy, but it is deadly. So if damage takes your stamina down to 0, this is a critical hit. To determine the effect, that's why they separated. That's why they separate, because they're using critical to mean critical injury. That's why they separated Mighty Strike. That's why Mighty Strike isn't a critical hit. There's Mighty Strike, and then there's a critical hit. So if you have been reduced to 0 or more, negative, you roll a 2d6 on the critical table and cross-reference the type of weapon used, so that's what that type of damage comes in. If the damage was enough to reduce you below 0, so you keep track of the negative stamina, you add that negative value as a positive value to the critical roll for each point of stamina below 0 that you lost. So for example, a character with 6 takes 8 stamina damage. That will result in a critical hit with a +2 modifier on that roll, on the table, the critical hit table. So if a character is suffering from a critical effect and they are struck again, the total cumulative negative is used. So if they were -2 and we're out of the combat, but someone strikes them again and now they're -8, then you'll add +8 to yet another roll from that other weapon, that other attack. As you can see from the table, negative stamina loss with multiple critical hits increases your chance of death. So surrender or flee. So, this is an interesting thing too. So it is also possible to pull a critical, for example, not have a critical take effect and instead leave the target on 0 stamina and out of the fight. So I guess if there is some reason, and they don't say like whose discretion this is, if this is the GM's or the player's discretion, but if you would take a critical hit, but instead are like, I don't want to limp, or be missing an eye or whatever, you're just 0 and you're out of the fight. So maybe, knocked unconscious or whatever. So no one is, going to attack you because you're just limp on the ground and not engaging anybody. But it doesn't say whose discretion that is. So that's interesting. But they do say surrender or flee. So for characters, their players have the choice of when they end the fight and how to do so. For enemies, that's the GM's job. So the idea of this setting is that, few intelligent beings are going to fight until they die. So you don't have those clearing rooms in a dungeon kind of situations as much with this, because you're starting at a much feebler level and you're just using the combat in negotiation is broke down, or there's no way to sneak around or get around this, and you have to confront them and you just want to scare them off basically more than just murder them. eviscerate them and chop them up into pieces is not an option anybody should should choose. All right. So, and that's also why they don't have attacks of opportunity, I think, to make it a more appealing option. So many creatures are likely to choose one of these options, surrender or flee, should their stamina reach 0. So recovery. So characters recover half of their lost stamina as soon as they take a half an hour to catch their breath. So very, very short rest will give you half your stamina back, as long as you're doing nothing else. Remaining stamina is recovered overnight. Critical injuries take much longer. They represent long-lasting wounds, and the GM can decide what's feasible when recovering from those injuries. So here is their critical injury table, and so like we said, it's the you roll 2d6, but you add whatever you went below 0 on. So here's an example. So the very lightest thing would be a flat blade across the skull. You're dazed for 1d6 rounds, and all actions are at a penalty of 2. So you're basically taking effects that will limit your abilities, cause some sort of effect, limit your abilities, but you can still stay in the fight. So you're not knocked unconscious if you take a critical roll, a critical hit. That's why you can, get lower and lower and lower, because you're still on your feet. Like going to 0 stamina is not unconsciousness. It just means, okay, what the effect of you doing that have, and is it going to be bad enough that you just want to get out of the fight, or what you want to do? And I guess that's why they say, because you aren't unconscious, you can just say, I'm out. So pulling the critical hit effect just means I'm going to fall unconscious. I'm not going to, stumble around missing toes or whatever the effects. So as you can see, as the results get higher, 1d3 fingers randomly sliced off. Determine which hand and drop what you're carrying. Your ear is slashed. Permanent penalty of 2 to tests involving hearing. Hacked in the shoulder. Determine which arm. Tests involving that arm are at a penalty of 5 for 1d6 games. And this is slashing. These are all slashing results. So 10 or more, cut through an artery, dead. So 10 or more on all the tables are a death by that style of weapon, that description of weapon. So piercing is just a jab. Yeah, the lightest one. So if you get the lightest one, you're basically still in it. But another hit is going to mean, you're going to take a very worse critical hit. Stab through the heart or brain. A rap on the skull, dazed for 1d6 rounds. A smash skull, dead. Oh, this is interesting. Blast. So magic attacks. So your weapon is too hot to touch and you drop it. Your clothing is on fire. Your gear catches fire. You breathe in fumes and are coughing. You're blinded by the blast, knocked off your feet. Your hair is singed off. Full in the face blast destroys your sense of smell. And then 10 and up is skin and bone seared, dead. All right, so how would you blast someone? This is their magic system. And so I mentioned earlier that anyone can do magic, but only the kind of magic careers are going to have much success at it. And there's a reason you don't want to fail at magic. So magical powers come from entities outside the material world. Spells are nothing more than requests or orders made. So no one learns spells. They are written down and must be read aloud. Practitioners own scrolls, books, and papers that contain the magical instructions to cast the spell. Gaining access to new spells involves finding new scrolls, parchments, and the like, which is the driving ambition of magic users. But that means anybody that has possession of the piece of paper, the instructions for a spell, can try to cast the spell, and they would just use their very low skill level to try to do that. So the path of the priest or wizard. Priests and wizards learn to cast spells via their different paths. So it's you share the same spell book. Like there is only one spell book in the world. They don't divide between holy and arcane or anything. Everyone just you're coming to the same result from a different path. So it just boils down to priests implore their gods and wizards demand magic from otherworldly beings. often infernal ones. So incantation is the skill that is used to cast. All characters have some level of incantation, but only these two careers allow you to advance. The initiate and the wizard apprentice, and then the priest and the wizard are the advanced levels that give you what was 16, I think was the max. So when you cast a spell, each spell costs the cost is measured in stamina. So you basically lose health. Everything is blood magic, basically. But I guess it also, stamina does not actually represent blood or, health. It actually represents like, your energy. So you're giving, energy from your body to power this spell. And, maybe it's, even mental energy. So you become exhausted, casting. So it all can be measured just with the single stamina stat. So you have to pay the stamina. Must be spent before the spell is attempted, and it's lost regardless of whether you are successful or not. So it represents the life force that is sacrificed to the otherworldly powers in exchange for the magic. Stamina is lost whether the spell is successfully cast or not. So a caster must then pass a standard incantation test to successfully cast. Spells can be attempted any number of times as long as you can pay the stamina. So, Wrath of the Otherworld. If a character attempts to cast a spell and rolls a 1 on d20, then they have potentially miscast. The spell fails and they pay the stamina costs, and then they must immediately attempt the test again. If they succeed in the second time, they're fine. If they fail again, they have miscast with potentially deadly results. That the strict wording of the spell was mispronounced, and as a result, you roll a d20 on the miscast table. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. This is rather bad. So casting spells in combat. So assuming a spell is within reach, so there's not ranges on spells. There, may be things that involve touch. I think they do specify like you need to be touching in the description. They don't have classes of spells, but they do say, you to heal someone, you need to be touching them. Typically, there are only a few words or gestures in effect to perform the action. The casting check is taken as normal. So, you're doing it in combat, and but you're you're depleting yourself as you're doing it. So you should be standing far away. So, finding and keeping spells. Anyone can try and cast a spell if they had it. So for priests and wizards, one of the only reasons to travel is to acquire new spells. However, finding a piece of paper with something magical scribed on it does not mean you found a spell. You might cast it, pay the stamina, incur the wrath of an otherworldly god for your clumsy attempt at controlling power. Only a fool would try casting something without knowledge that it would work. So magical practitioners are cautious, or they are dead. So in the description for the magic careers, they do say you've got a bunch of pieces of paper. So wizards and priests need to keep their written spells close at hand to cast them, but they run the risk of having them stolen. So they have false notes, incomplete spells at hand. So they say, there's a lot of scraps of paper and things that are meant for just deception. What papers are actually, what scrolls are actually effective, and people may steal them and hopefully get a dummy or incorrect spell. So spells of character creation. This is a little rough for spell casting because I think the GM is going to have to put scrolls there's going to have to be things found pretty quickly, because as a spell caster, you're going to get very frustrated very fast with your starting spell and how useless it is, and we'll see that. When a character creates an initiate or a wizard's apprentice, they gain access to a single scroll with a spell they can cast. They will need to find, steal, beg, barter for others. So you roll on the spell list to learn your starting spell, and you can have a really lousy starting spell, and so you're a wizard that's never going to cast anything because it's not worth spending stamina to, read a language or whatever in combat. So priests and wizards share these spells so that there's only one spell book, and the only difference is their casting manner. Oh, here's the miscast table. So very light result is the caster's hand catches on fire, 1d6. 2 small horns grow from your head. Your eyes turn milky white. Your fingers elongate, blood runs from your eyes. Spell backfires, blasting the caster across the room for 2d6 damage. All the caster's hair falls out. A miasma of magic mist fills the nearby space. The caster is possessed by an otherworldly being for 1d6. And here we go. The caster's arms become covered in small scales. So there's nothing that... there's things that could kill you because there's the 2d6 damage is pretty bad. But and it doesn't look like it increases. But it's just like a lot of random kind of crazy effects. And I like that a lot of them are physical too. That's a fun thing. The appearance of your magic user will change. So here are all of the spells, and there's not many. Yeah, there's what, 18. Oh no, there's more. Sorry. Oh no, this is the no. I'm looking at the. Oh no, there is. There's 36, I guess, if I'm looking at that right. Yeah, 6 times 6. So yeah, there's a lot of spells that are not non-combat spells. That if that's what you roll for your first spell, you're gonna probably change careers pretty fast. All right. So yeah, you do the same sort of thing. You roll 2d6s. One gives you the group that you're rolling from, and then the second gives you the spell within that group, and it's all alphabetical. How it's based. So you've got alarm, anti-magic, armor, banish, befriend, blast, blur, burn, detection, dominate, enchant, fear, feather, fix, float, foulness, fumble, and hammer. Heal, so that's the only healing spell. Illusion, lightning, lock, multiply, night, path, read, see, servant. And it's nice that they're simple enough. They didn't, it's not somebody's, unholy laughter. Yeah, you pretty much can tell from what it is, what it's going to do. Shield, silence, sleep, speak, swarm, unlock, unseen, and wall. So unseen, I guess, would be invisible. So the cost is listed after the spell. So 3 stamina every time you want to cast alarm. So this will keep you, you'll be alerted. You won't be surprised when you're doing your overnight or long rests. Yeah, but there are not a lot of combat spells. I would say it's like 50-50. So your chances of rolling, if you're just going to get to roll once for the spell, your starting spell, I don't know if befriend, yeah, that's gonna. So it's good because it's gonna force a lot of early levels, a lot of creativity into the role playing. And I guess if you don't have a combat spell initially, you will eventually get one, and your incantation, you hopefully will level up your incantation before then so that you can reliably cast a combat spell, because there'd be nothing worse than having a low level incantation and be like, constantly hurting yourself with fire instead of doing any damage. Yeah, so burn is kind of their fireball. Dominate, yeah, enchant, fear, feather, fix is repair. Float is odd. You get to float 10 feet in the air, so I guess you're not going to be hit by anything in melee. But you're not going to be much use to people either. Just throw stones at them. Fumble is odd too. Become incredibly clumsy, so you're unable to pick up your weapon. I guess it's like disarm then. Hammer gives you enhanced strength. So heal is your only. So 1d6 plus 3 stamina, either yourself or allies, but you pay 2. So you literally could roll plus 4 stamina. So 2 stamina for a magic user if they rolled the minimum and they paid the price. But this is a touch spell, yeah. So the caster must be touching. That was the only one that specified that. The other ones, don't talk about range or anything. They just give a description. And I guess you can kind of say, well, if you did this in a hallway, that wouldn't work. Or if you tried to do this through a keyhole, that's not going to work. So from the description, you should have some. There's lightning as an attack. And then read. Yeah, that would be a great... My spell is read. Look at this. Career wizard. See, servant. Yeah, servant is interesting. They specify. So because the names are very minimalist, servant should be called like, everybody's a critic or whatever. But once you cast, you summon an ethereal servant to do your bidding. The creature is intelligent, irascible, and critical, but it is able to carry messages and items for a vast distance for the caster traveling at a magical speed. The creature remains to criticize the caster for 1d6 hours. So the GM is just going to have to constantly have a critical ethereal servant as part of the party for a while, which could be fun or could get really annoying. But yeah, there's some things that working on, like sleep works well to crowd control and neutralize. Unlocking spell, yeah, I mean, that would be when you get your unlocking spell and then you immediately change your career to a thief. Unseen or wall. And look at that group of fine fellows. I love what they did with the illustrations. It is funny though, it doesn't match the rest of the graphic design, the typeset. All right, and creating spells. So spells are really simple to define, and they just need a stamina cost and a general effect. So game masters are encouraged to create their own spells. So that would be fun, because they covered the basics. You can definitely see there's invisibility, and there's sleep, and there's, talk to animals and all that good stuff. But it would be fun to come up with stuff, especially have them discover spells that are very situational, and include them as part of the session. And that often happens. Like you find a potion of water breathe right before you have to jump off a ship, that kind of stuff. But so creating spells would be fun, I think, for the game. And then they talk about magical items, and I like this comes up a lot with OSR as well. So magical items such as wands, staves, amulets, and talisman are fairly rare. So generally they have a spell-like effect, and rather than granting a bonus to the roll. So it's not like a +1 sword. It's going to be like a sword that casts lightning or does like lightning damage or something. Magical items tend to work one of two ways. They either allow you to cast a spell without needing an incantation skill check, or they allow the user to cast a spell with a check but without paying the stamina cost. So that's very useful. So either way, magical artifacts are usually operate in a limited number of times per day or a limited number of charges before they're exhausted. So that's pretty standard. So magical items are coveted. Oh, I like this too. This is something that I think is fun to include. Magic items like, swords and things may possess a will and sometimes intelligence of their own and have their own goals and agendas. So taking on a magical item is not something to do without due consideration. So you could have a bloodthirsty sword, or a sword that's on a quest of, revenge, that's constantly going to be, asking you to do that. So here's our bestiary. And very standard, and they give, so here, the difference with the monster stat lines is there's a name, weapons if they have any, number of actions per round, because remember, some can have more than one, their stamina, and then their adventuring skill value. So it's just a generic value if they have to do an opposed roll, like if they have to notice you, what was it called? If you have to spot you when you're stealthing, they just have a very generic bonus, and it's usually pretty low for all of those standard skills. Then they have armor, and then there's some notes and physical description. And so, and then they say, alter anything that you want, values for the various races, types of creatures, as you see fit to keep things fresh and keep the characters on their toes. Yeah, that's good, instead of making it very predictable. Even though the setting is very predictable, it may be fun to change stuff up. So monsters have these other special abilities that come up with a lot of their attacks and things. So they give you a description of all of the all of these types of things. It was a brittle, so if the creature is susceptible to impact damage, so blunt weapons will do double damage. Dissolve, they will do dissolve matter, so like a gelatinous cube. Ethereal, flame attacks, flying, formless, so they need to be no real form, so they can move through very small spaces. Intelligent, poisonous, puppet, regenerating like a troll, spellcaster, or tracking. So here's the example. It's pretty straightforward. So the Chimera, monster with 2 actions. They have a claw and a sting, so that's a 7 bonus on either of those, and then that's the damage. And their armor is a d3. Their basic adventuring skills are 5 and 42 stamina. So, and they have the poisonous. Yeah, their attacks are also, I guess their sting, right? They're going to list that as a sting is poisonous. So, Chimera, Direwolves, Demon, Dragon, Dwarf. So very generic. Oh, so yeah, the monster versions of the communities. Ghouls, Giant, Goblin. So we'll see in the rest of the bundle and the rest of the things that they've developed. They have a essentially like a monster manual that they've added. So these are generic Griffin, Halfling, Hobgoblin. So you can be playing as opposed. So even though they're calling them civilized. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so monsters will have a civilized or uncivilized trait, meaning they'd be a community or not, but they're still going to be opposing you. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so these are the stats for... And I guess, yeah, so I guess these would be generic NPC stats as well. If you're playing a human and you end up like attacking the innkeeper or whatever, you know, these are the stats you could use. Oh, okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, there's something that's going to come up later that makes sense, because there were no stat lines for the NPC book that they made, and that's because everyone has these already built in. A Lich, a Manticore. There's our cube. Ooze. Ratman. Skeleton. Yeah, so very, you know, generic, very, but, you know, like they said, they encourage you to kind of change your regenerating troll up into something a little more unpredictable. An Unman. Unmen are humans mixed bizarrely with beasts. Oof. All right. A white, a wraith, a wyvern. And then they have a quick Game Master section. So this will be, we'll go through the other books, of course, not like this, but I just wanted to give you a sense of everything in the rule book and what the differences are and why it might be fun to try this, and what, you know, what you can imagine this kind of open, kind of hackable rule set can be, you know, used with. So they talk about, yep, and it's just basically, you know, the concepts of this game and what to keep in mind, and basically what you have to do. So combat is deadly, can have long-lasting implications. Many enemies would rather escape or surrender than fight to the death. Magic is low level and accessible by everyone, but real power requires specialization. Monsters and other creatures are not necessarily evil, but may act as such because they're opposed, you know, to your parties. So it's good. They're saying, you know, monsters aren't evil. There are no evil races. They try to minimize their use of race and called the different types of characters you can play, communities. So that works. Yeah, so talking about the dangers of combat, and so you're probably not going to want to just pile monsters on, and nobody wants to, you know, is just living to slaughter everybody. And yeah, they also are talking about, so they're calling it hackable very much. So hackable to modify it and twist it to your needs. So make new careers, monsters, or spells and create your own. And then they also talk about like a session 0 or, you know, player expectations. And that's always a good thing to kind of mitigate what could be problems. Like we're not fighting enough, we're not negotiating enough, we're not role-playing enough, we're not storytelling enough. You want to find out what your players actually want to do. And if that will also determine whether or not they're going to be happy with the system. But, you know, kind of try to control their expectations so they don't go in thinking, yeah, the examples that they give are good. You know, creating a character focused on investigation and then playing a combat focused game, or a game master to create a horror scenario that nobody wants to play horror. Yeah. So it's good to set everything up. So the setting is very generic. And you can, use a lot of old school materials to play just about anything. And they talk about the two kind of the role of the GM and the two approaches you can take, where you can either script everything very carefully, but then, the tendency is you may have to railroad to keep people on script, your party on script, your players. You may have to railroad them a little bit which means kind of confining their choices and directing them in a certain way, which may not be fun because they'll feel that. And then the other way is completely improvisational and be very open to anything they want to do, and just have a lot of tables to prepare things on the fly and to kind of respond to what they're doing. So either extreme of those is not perfect. Like a blend of those they recommend as being the best, because the railroading thing feels like, well, we're just telling your story. Why don't you just read your script to us, because we're not actually playing anything. We don't get to make decisions. And the completely improv open world can also feel like nothing has consequences. Whatever we do is fine, and you're just going to react to it and give us, some other thing that's happening. So it doesn't feel like you're having an effect on the world, or the world is real. Like you lose your disbelief is triggered very heavily. So that's nice advice. I think that's good. So again, they emphasize, have fun. If you're not having fun, you are playing your game wrong. And that is the end. So here, let's take a quick look at their character sheet. So the character sheet in my printed book doesn't have this little border thing, so it's super minimal, and it has the same font. So it looks very, very minimal. But as you can see, this changes. Oh no, it's on here a little bit. Okay, yeah. So it gives you a place for your career, your 2 stats basically, and then to have you mark how to mark a lower max level and a higher max level on all of your adventuring skills, and then to keep track of that level. So here's all of our 32 skills, and then writing your career skills and levels, your weapons and traits and possessions. So very little room to add anything. And wow, the spell list is even shorter. It's only 2 lines. So you might need a adjusted spell list. But so very minimal character sheet, but you see immediately, there's 2 stats, and then everything else is your skills. And you may, I guess, if you're changing careers, that it may not be that useful, but it may be useful to initially mark which skills are part of your career that you can actually modify. But a very simple player sheet. So that's it's a B5, so it's a half of a sheet. So it's a pretty tiny character sheet, but has enough of the stats. It seems like, there might be some like the answers to your questions and things. Oh, I guess that's what but this little background paragraph is for. But the answers to some of those questions for your career and stuff you may want to have a place to fill in. So that is the core book. Oh, let me take a look in chat real quick. Yeah. So that is the core book for Warlock. So because this is all about getting some attention to the there's the character sheet again, to the bundle of holding, which has got a few days left. So take a look at that. Let's take a look at what's included. So there's a basic level. There's always 2 levels with bundles of holding, and the basic level will give you the core book, Kingdom, Griff's Veil, and Three's Company. And these are Kingdom, which we'll take a look at first, is basically a book that fleshes out more of the background setting. So if you want to go with their kind of default setting or their details that they're filling in, Kingdom, so it's like the Kingdom Gazetteer, which will give you all kinds of things to include in the setting, because there's just the basic kingdom that you can world build with your group in a session 0, or the GM can go for inspiration from this book. So that looks like the same staff. And as I said earlier too, this is just the title page. So the covers are a separate PDF. So depending on how you'd want to print them, they don't have the cover included. So you can stay very black and white. So you can see from here, let's go a little bigger. The cultures of the kingdoms, the royal family, and then all of the locations basically on the map that they give you. The Grim Biskerstaff. So let's take a quick look. Oh, it's linked. Nice. So Biskerstaff is the city on the river. So the south of the kingdom is the city of Grim Biskerstaff, a trade port. Nice. So they go, yeah. So here you go. Here's an actual city that you can, with locations. Oh, there's nice maps in here too. Wow. Yeah, so these look much less old school and much newer style. That's a really well drawn map. So that gives you a lot of, there's some, yeah, nice little detailed spot illustrations. And then tables, there we go. Whose boat is on the river? So a D6 table to so you encounter. So here's all, yeah. So they're giving you details of the setting and then adventure hooks. So D6 tables that are going to give you, and a nice rat man, give you things that can be happening in these certain locations. Yeah, based on the types of things. So rumors about the fortress. So these are just adventure hooks and settings. So yeah, like just a gazetteer to try to give you some, if you're not going to do this yourself and, you know, the GM doesn't want to come up with all his stuff, all the original, you know, place names and things themselves, they have provided you with this that already exists, plus tables of adventure hooks to really put you in there. But it's not, they're not complete adventures. It's just a way, and especially if you're going to be very sandbox, this will help you sandbox into this world based on what the writers were originally thinking. So that's fun. So yeah, that's all the different locations, and then yeah, they're giving you monsters that you would run into. Oh, good, and fishmen. So they're giving you new monsters actually based on this situation and speccing them out for you. The organizations around this city. That's great. So a lot of this, I'm sure, was inspired. There's probably some Warhammer feel to a lot of this. Oh, and then some locals. So a docker and a fish warden. Oh, there we go. So there's some actual stats for some of these characters. Nice. And even some character art. Yeah, if you want to choose. Wow, and there's a huge hirelings. Currently available hirelings. Leafy Lysander. Nice. Yeah, so they'll expand on this even more. So adventures. And goals. Oh, nice. Yeah, so here is a little beginnings, I guess a little bit more than a hook, kind of a starting, a little starting paragraph to launch you into a setting. Nice. Yeah, so lots of tables and chances to give you a very sandbox approach to the world. And then Griff's Vale Adventure, is intended to be the kind of the starting campaign. So it's you can use it with your existing characters, and then or make it the starting point for a larger campaign. So just a specific area in the kingdom. Yeah, so west of we've already seen they mentioned the Black Spine Mountains. So they're starting to give you some geography. And the seasons. Nice. Yeah, so there's just tables for generating everything going on in this little starting adventure. And there's a typewriter font. Yeah, so here's the map of the mountains. It looks like the adventurers had a dot matrix printer. And so this is all kind of just probably early starting adventure and hooks to give you, to get you into it. Yeah, and a lot of 1d6 tables. So I think it's, this is just like a little starting campaign, right? So it just leads you through these very kind of early adventures and, kind of help you learning combat and everything. And there it looks like there's a stronghold and the Watchman's Inn. Yeah, so they give you a lot of tables and maps. That's very good. Interesting though. Yeah, they do squares. I guess it's for scale. The squares, you don't have to be guessing. And then other locations around Griff's Vale. Nice. Yeah, so it includes a lot. Yeah, a lot of things I don't want to spoil too much. I just want to give you a sense of like what's in here. So it's a pretty, and it's a 76 page, adventure. So there's a lot of statted. Oh, and some different weapons and items we found. Oh, a demon sword. There we go. So there's one of our first magic items. Yeah, this may be a way to early adventures, always a good way to equip adventurers. Let's see. So Griff's Vale is the starting adventure, and then they give you Three's Company, which is, there's a title page for that. I don't know if that's Janet or Chrissy. I don't know if they, so it's 3 different adventures: A Ghost of Holyford, Vice and Villainy in Vermingham, and A Red Knight in Fair Marinese. So it may be, similar to the, they may have done this in structure like the classic Enemy Within kind of Warhammer Fantasy setting, making it 3 adventures and having them connected, because it looks like there's Ratmen associated. But yeah, so these are 3 adventures, and they all have, it looks like, very specific and maybe higher level. So Three's Company is a set of adventures for Warlock. Each of the 3 adventures provides suggestions for why the player characters found themselves here and what led to further adventures in this scenario. These adventures have not been written to be played one after the other, but some thought has been given to doing that and will be provided below. All of the adventures excuse me, take place within the context of the kingdom, so they'll probably be referring, there we go, and in the implied setting of Warlock, and given more detail in the Warlock Supplement Kingdom. So they will be making references to things that you may need Kingdom for. So I think that's why it's all included, to make use of these adventures as more of a framework, set of tools more than a script. So the structure is meant to provide all the toys in a sandbox. Yeah, some more kind of sandbox open adventures. So we'll just take a quick look at the beginning of this. So they'll give you an introduction, description of the village, and then set up to the adventure, and then some more d6. Nice. So there's 3 adventures, and no, sorry, that's it. So then there's 3 adventures. So there's starting campaign, and then the 3 adventure booklet, the kingdom listing, and then the core book itself. So that's the starter level of the bundle of holding. And then if you go for the, I forget what they call it, but the more complete, the advanced or extended version, that will give you compendiums. So there are 2 compendiums that they have written for Warlock, and they include things that will kind of expand, so different paths, right? So they've got community careers, so Dwarf Inventor, Tunnel, well, I guess we can kind of scroll through things. Oh, and more spells, So more careers specific to communities, more spells, a lot more spells, more magical artifacts. So a lot of things that if you didn't want to come up with original stuff, a lot of extra things to include. And there's 2 of these, so that's a lot. It collects the first 4 supplements for Warlock. So they did do like smaller updated supplements. So there's been significant, so there's a Warlock Discord group that has been submitting a lot of different things. The contents are presented as originally released and represent expansions for both players and the game master. All right, I've been talking for too long. Yes. All right. So here's the compendium. So there are 4 supplements. Wow. So they have contributed a lot, significantly. So there's now community careers. Nice. And they give you the exact same plus the 2 questions. Right. All right. And then let's take a look. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. at the second compendium. So we've got, oh, interesting. So this is going to add more physical appearance, cruel misfortune, no rest for the wicked. Yeah, some more advanced or details for different careers. The cruel world. So let's see what they said. This looks a little different. So the first one seemed to add both for players and characters. And this section, oh, some random tables for, I see, for like character appearance and things. So kind of separate people's looks and stuff. Yeah. So during character creation, you can do height and hairstyle and things that are included in the character sheet, but it can give you more of a way to generate more specifics of your characters, the mementos you're carrying and things. So beyond that background that your career and your community give you. So yeah, new character options. Oh, so maybe no rest for the wicked. So all of the, oh yeah, and this includes the added careers from the previous compendium. A Dwarf Slayer, that sounds familiar. Nice. Yeah, some more advanced details about all of the careers so far. The cruel world. Oh, so here we go. Yeah, I was wondering, they didn't have things like, falling damage and, sickness and stuff. And so now this has been added. Those sorts of things they usually always find. So here's all of the types of injuries. And they even add black powder for, so you can actually, there's guns. Firearms have been added and how disease would work. Reloading and bombs. Wow, so you can get into explosives and then, help for writing your own scenarios. That's nice. All right, what else do we have here? I think I might have to get rid of that. There we go. Okay, so that's the second compendium. Oh, and here is their monster manual. So additional monsters are provided in the, what is it called? The Phantasmagoria. Sorry, it's not on the title page, but here's a whole nother list of kind of more specific and less generic in a lot of ways. The monsters that are included in the core book are pretty generic. So more horrible creatures that oh yeah, and so they're referencing more and more the effects of the kingdom, and here's notes and letters written. Nice. Yeah, so developing a lot more. So there's their monster manual that was now added, and this is the Rogues Gallery. So this is a book of NPCs, and so it just is added to give you a lot of flavor. Like we saw the available hirelings, and they had a little description and everything. And this is a book of just named characters that occur in this setting. So bad Victor, really, really bad drunk. So lines he would say, his description and motivation, and just and his secrets. So just discussion of him, but as you can see, no stat lines. So just kind of the narratively how he works, and you would probably give him the stats of a default, guardsman or soldier or whatever. You can take default stats to flesh them out, but they are these named characters, and they may actually be fun ways to inspire your character creation. Like this is the style of characters. So rogues, miscreants, and vagabonds. So this book details a selection of rogues, miscreants, and vagabonds that can be used to populate any city of the kingdom and any other fantasy setting for that matter. They are designed to be recurring, persistent individuals that the player characters may interact with many times and can be interconnected to create the sense of a living, breathing location during the game. Note that there are no stats for these characters. In Warlock, it is very easy to create these numbers on the fly, and this way the game master can fit them to the needs of the moment. The back of this book are notes on how this is done from the Compendium 2, as well as a discussion of creating character maps to keep all the non-player character relationships in mind. Oh, that's interesting. The format of the entries is as follows. Yeah, we took a look at one of those entries. So you're talking about character maps. So I think that's a thing that's done in like fiction writing and screenwriting as well. Larger casts, if you have a lot of characters in a story, you want to kind of like do a little flow chart or kind of breakdown, or kind of like how the FBI does when they're tracking the mafia. You want to, who's the Godfather, who are the soldiers, break down everyone's relationship to each other and what has gone on between them. And so that you can keep that whole thing, you can keep track of that whole thing. And yeah, make the world be, kind of living and breathing, because it's acting upon its, each other. All the moving parts are much more interesting. So yeah, so they provide you with many, many colorful characters to populate the city. And then I think we've got 2 more. So Bridgetown is another setting. It looks like, they're giving an adventure. So welcome to Bridgetown. So Bridgetown is a magnificent ruin, a dilapidated monstrosity of empty towers and echoing halls, overrun with thieves and killers. It is also a dangerous place, and it is best summed up as those unlucky enough to live there I would say welcome to Bridgetown, but I'd rather say run away from Bridgetown as fast as you can. So it's just another city to give, like the setting that was in the kingdom, and then the Griff's Vale, that city that things led to. So yeah, just a description of the city and then maps and everything. And who is the mayor? She looks stable. Oh, nice. How does she feel today? Oh, great. On a D6. And there's a wandering madman table. Oh, this is great. Yeah, so this is a place that you can unfortunately have to deal with. Yeah, so lots of tables to the traders in treaty. So yeah, an adventure. So they give you the description of the setting, and then here's an adventure that takes place in Bridgetown. You get the opportunity to investigate the town and its inhabitants while searching for something that isn't what it seems. Nice. So Bridgetown, yeah, an adventure and another setting. And then lastly, what you get is goblins. So this is a collection. So yeah, description of how goblins and hobgoblins, actually. There's a lot of monsters in here. How they work in the world. And are you playing them? Yeah, so if you want to do a more detailed, and actually, could you actually play them as PCs? It's a short, it's a shorter, well, it's not short, it's 84 pages. So, yeah, a description of goblins, but then it kind of elaborates their stat lines for all the different types of goblins, and then elaborates on how they, their culture and how they're interacting with the world. Hobhounds. What about orcs? Ah. Yeah, so the existence, so it's only goblins and hobgoblins, so maybe orcs have never existed. And then some more associated monsters that would be part of this culture, and they're little giant spiders. Night troll. So yeah, fleshing out more monsters. Giving you some tables. Oh, right, and the dragon. That's right, their god is the dragon. So priests of the dragon. Oh, and here's magic for the goblins as well. So some goblins make fine wizards and have their own magic tradition. So here's a spell list for goblins. Wow, it's almost like you could play as a goblin. They give you a lot. It's all fleshed out. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I'm wondering, I didn't see that at the beginning. I'll go back to the table of contents. But yeah, all the descriptions of the Goblin Kingdom. Nice. Plenty of tables. That's great. Yeah, you can definitely, like, keeping with what their vision of goblins was, you could definitely have a whole goblin campaign based on this. Oh yeah, yeah. So then here's Into the Muck, a scenario for Warlock set in Black Spike. Right. So yeah, a whole background just on goblins and goblin culture, and some, yeah. So lots of stats for all the animals. Yeah. So it doesn't say all the monsters. Yeah, so it's just a huge paragraph of the clans and the types of... So, yeah. but it doesn't say, choose a goblin as your community. They give you enough that, goblin players. There we go. Just as any other communities, goblins can be used as player characters. Here's a list of unique careers a goblin can take, although they can, of course, take any of the standard careers. Yeah, so this is a goblin supplement to add them to the world as a culture and a community and a player character. It is worth the player and the game master discussing the available careers beforehand. Choose something suitable. So hedge wizard, goblin peddler, gutter snipe, mushroom farmer, spider rider, and tinkerer. That's great, yeah. That's exactly what this is goblins as PCs and goblins as a pretty, significant part of the world. That's great. All right, so that is, let me switch back real quick here. So I hope people are still with me here, but I wanted to get through everything. So that was Warlock, and I wanted to flip over real quick. I couldn't find the page quickly enough, but flip over and show you guys the bundle real quick. If it's still up and running, but yeah, right now they have the Warlock bundle. There we go. There we go. So I'm not getting any commission or anything. I just think this is a fun, simple system, and it's worth people being able to get a hold of it for a cheap price. So as I was talking about here, I can't get any closer. There we go. Yeah, I've only got a couple more days, so 4 more days. So sorry about that. So the starter collection gave you that first set of things: Warlock, Kingdom, Griff's Veil, and the Three's Company. So a lot to get you through Griff's Veil, a starting adventure, and then 3 more scenarios. But then the bonus collection had all that compendium, the Rogues Gallery of NPCs, their monster manual, the Bridgetown supplement, and then goblins as player characters. So as you can see, here's all the great. Here's the cover art of a lot of those books. So they all have that same look. Yeah, so it's really fun. So $7.95 is a decent, because I think each one of these is like $7 just as a PDF. So yeah, value to $28 exactly. So yeah, it's definitely and it's for Direct Relief is their charity. Oh, for health workers, yeah. So charity for health workers. Yeah, so here's everything again in detail. And you get to see all the covers this time. So there's Kingdom and Griff's Veil, Three's Company, and then the bonus collection is what they call it. So yeah, you level up. And leveling up is a little difficult. So I'm not doing you guys any favor by telling you about this so late, because I think the price of the level up increases based on how many people supported it. So there's Compendium 1 and 2, the Rogues Gallery, the Monster Manual, Phantasmagoria, Bridgetown, and then the Goblin Supplement. I like the cover of that. So right now their threshold, it's still reasonable. Yeah, their threshold price. So this is the price you have to match based on the people who support it. It's $17.15. So that's decent because it's $70 worth of PDFs, and it is PDF. So this is only the digital version. But as you could see from what we looked at, they're very printer friendly. And the nice thing is Bundle of Holding is DRM free. So you can look at it on any device. You're not looking at it in a viewer. And it's very friendly for printing and using in your game groups. All right. So thank you so much for enduring all of this. And also I'd like to say that Warlock, when I checked right before this live stream, Warlock is also on sale on Drive-Thru RPG. So all of the print-on-demand versions of any of these books are also available. So if there was a combination of actual physical books that you think might work, and it is nice to have. I'm really grateful to have the hardcover of the core book, especially before it went up in price for the premium color version. But you do have to consider that font choice of theirs. think I'm sure it's something the community, it's a sore spot for the community. But yeah, so that is Warlock, a recreation, kind of a rules light role-playing game emulating that old school British role-playing of fighting fantasy and Warhammer fantasy. So it's really charming. I really like it. I think the guys did a really good job of bringing old school, bringing a rules light old school game into something that can be very flexible. And they also have a sci-fi setting. So if you want to check the Fire Ruby Designs page on on Drive-Thru RPG, you can see they also have the their sci-fi version of this. So check it out. I put a link in the description for the bundle of holding. You've got about 4 days for that. And yeah, I just thought this would be a fun run through and a lot of reading. And I wanted to do as much damage to my voice as possible. So thanks a lot for joining me. I appreciate you going through this with me, and let me know if because I decided to look at PDFs, which is a little colder and more impractical, and you're just kind of scrolling. Let me know if you prefer looking at physical books, because I just worry that you're not getting, depending that the lighting and everything can take away from the experience of turning pages in a book. But if you think looking through the physical book is more interesting and just a little bit more tactile and fun, let me know. This is my first experiment with doing a flip through that was actually a scroll through, but I did want to show you like the quality of the physical book itself. But anyhow, that has been Warlock. That has been 2.5 hours of Warlock. I read to you the entire bundle of holding. So thanks for joining me. Give this video a like and help other people find it. And also subscribe to the channel if you want to get notifications of further live streams and things that are going on with the channel. We do lore videos. Tomorrow we'll do our 100th episode special of the weekly live. And yeah, all sorts of things. Once restrictions loosen up, I'm sure there'll be actual plays and other fun live stream events that will actually physically be in the same room together again. So upturntable.com is the website. You can find us on Twitter and both YouTube and Twitch. And please take a look at what we've got going on. And if you'd like to support what's going on and get some early access to all videos and some special benefits, go to patreon.com/upturntable. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.